Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews Saturday Conversation Show, a weekly interview series where I talk to entertainment media personalities and content creators about their work and love of movies. Today's guest is Robin Block, the founder and CEO of CREATORVC, who released the acclaimed crowd-funded In Search of documentaries, with the latest entry In Search of Darkness 1990 to 1994 releasing later this year. And people can go to 90shorrordoc.com to find out more about In Search of Darkness 1990 to 1994. As someone who has seen all of the Search of movies so far, including The Search of Tomorrow and The Search of Last Action Hero as well, I can only recommend that people check out 1994 as well, because I'm going to be first in line to try to snap up one of these as well, because I absolutely love these documentaries. And Robert Block, I just want to say thank you so very much for joining me today. How are you today, sir?
I'm really good. Yeah, just coming off the Christmas break, the holiday break. So today's really my first proper day, sort of back in the hot seat, because we've got a massive year this year. We've got, as you mentioned, at the end of the year, we're releasing In Search of Darkness 90 to 94. And before then, we're going to be doing a pre-sale campaign for our horror gaming documentary which is a series called Terabytes.
Yeah.
That kicks off in February, and then around April time, we're going to be releasing our first documentary about a single movie, which is Aliens Expanded.
Wow.
And so this morning, what I've done is we've got like a 5 hour assembly cut, a rough cut of Aliens Expanded, and we sent it out to about 100 backers to get their feedback, which is quite a scary kind of process for us. So I've just been collating all the feedback from that, which has been really, really positive. So yeah, a good start to the new year.
Always very busy you are. I know that you're incredibly prolific with your projects and such. I want to go back though to the time when, when you were a kid. I think you and I are very much kindred spirits in that we're kind of like raised in the VHS generation, you know. I think you and I and many people who probably listening to this right now know what it's like to like walk across those video aisles and haunt the horror sections and the action
Absolutely.
sections as well. I mean, that was my jam. Action, sci-fi, horror. I know that was for you as well. What was it about those movies, though, for you back then that really kind of put a spark underneath you to become, made you become the creator that you are today in regards to putting together these movies for people to watch?
I think that the for me working on these projects is like play. Like it's even when I'm not working, I'm kind of thinking about projects I want to do, and I follow that as my sort of divining rod in terms of what interests me. But I'm hugely nostalgic for that time. I was raised as part of that VHS generation, absolutely.
Yeah.
Loved movies, loved them. And as I got, as I became 9, 10, 11 years old, got into all the 80s classics when they were coming out and loved horror, loved sci-fi. And that kind of, when I was a slightly older teenager, well, like 13, 14, my friends, we used to go and rent movies, watch them. And I'm hugely nostalgic for that period in my life, because it was just full of innocence and ideas, and you didn't over criticize things, you didn't expect too much, and a lot of these films really delivered. And when I got into my sort of late 30s, I started really reminiscing about that time, and it was a very strong emotional pull. And what I realized quite early on was actually there was a lot of people of my generation who were born in the mid to late 70s or early 80s that have this affinity towards that era of filmmaking. And there's so much to delve into, and it becomes, for some of our backers, it becomes part of their identity. And even with you, Matt, like it's, you're pursuing this channel because it's an intrinsic interest that you've got no choice. You've got to, because that's what you're
Yeah.
into. It's part of who you are.
Yeah.
And that's a very compelling kind of thread. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm not a director, I'm not a film director, but I really admire great art and great films, and that's very subjective. But there's so many amazing films in the 80s and 90s um, that they just don't make them like that anymore. And that's what I think people hark back to, because our target audience knows the films inside out. They've seen all the commentaries, all the behind the scenes stuff, and I suppose what we're trying to do is create an experience for them where they can go back and revisit it all. So it's kind of like, the way I look at what we do is, um, we really want to help amplify that nostalgia and that entertainment and remind you of why you love what you love.
When I was doing research on you, I came across this interview from way back like 2012, when you were with a company called Red Sky Vision, was kind of like a corporate, you did corporate videos and such. And in the interview, it was really interesting because you were talking about how when it came to that gig, the philosophy that you had was all about who is the audience that you're pitching towards, who are the people you pitch towards. And I think something that really comes through in regards to what you're doing with Creator VC is that this is audience-driven content. This is content. You're not making it for yourself in as much as you're making it for a community, and from that, the community is just as relevant in regards to the making of these projects that you're working on there
Oh,
either.
100%. I mean, there's a duality to it. So the duality is that ultimately what inspires me to set these projects up is imagining in my mind what would entertain me the most. But you
Hmm.
have to, so at the beginning, I always start with, like, what am I emotionally attracted to? Like, I'm working on a couple of projects this year where I'm just like, I'm electric about them, right? And I really pay attention to that emotion. But that has to be balanced with working with our audience. So our process now of creating these projects has been transformed over the last 5 years. So we really start with the audience. We say, look, here is an idea. Can you feed back on it? We send out a big survey. And that does a couple of things. One, it tells us, is there enough demand to
Hmm.
make this worthwhile pursuing as a project? And two, it allows the audience and the super fans an opportunity to kind of critique and make our initial idea better. And that's kind of core to what we do. So I don't really see myself in the film industry or in the documentary industry. I feel like we're kind of a band apart. We're very much hand in hand with our backer base and our audience, and often they inform us on what we should work on. And I love that. And with each project we're doing, we're trying to iterate and get better in terms of that um, uh, interactivity. If you, especially at the beginning, if you back and engage with one of our projects, it really is a completely unique experience. It's not like going to the cinema and watching a movie that you have no connection with. This is something that if you back one of our projects, it needs to be about something that you're really passionate about, that you care about, that you want to be part of. And what happens to our backers is they inevitably become ingrained in the history of that project. You look at In Search of Darkness, which is one of the most successful independent documentaries ever made, right? So you're looking at like 40, 50,000 backers across the series, like huge, global. And I think back to our first Kickstarter and the people that have their names in the credits of that first project. That means something. That's kind of almost like an identity. I backed In Search of Darkness at its Kickstarter stage. And if you have a Blu-ray of In Search of Darkness, they're very rare. They go for hundreds of dollars on eBay, right? So there's a kind of intrinsic value to that, and it's a kind of manifestation of your fandom, which is by design. We want to create. I'm not really interested in the general audience or making something popular. I want to serve a niche audience that really loves what we're talking about. And that's really our job. And that's what we're trying to get better at.
I've talked to a lot of different independent filmmakers in regards to crowdfunding, whether it be Indiegogo, Kickstarter, etc. And some people really liked it. Some people found it incredibly stressful. When you first started off doing crowdfunding for your projects, what was that experience like at the beginning? And what did you learn from your first experiences doing your crowdfunding for, say, In Search of the Last Action Hero that you brought to your other projects?
Yes, that was the first In Search of the Last Action Heroes, which is this poster here on my wall. Will always have like a really magical place because I was working with my great friend Oliver Harper, who runs the YouTube channel Oliver Harper's Retrospectives. And I should caveat this, Ollie got me into this because I discovered Ollie's channel back in 2016. I was like, wow, this is speaking to my heart. Like
Mm,
I used to have friends over to watch a movie and then we'd watch Ollie's retrospective of it. And I ended up striking up a friendship with him and working with him on his channel. And then I decided, we should do a documentary. And that's how all of this happened. So I remember putting In Search of the Last Action Heroes together and we launched a Kickstarter. And I remember at 6 p.m., I think it was 6 p.m. on a Tuesday, this is in 2018, like pressing like the send button on the Kickstarter page. And then I met my wife and my daughter for pizza in London. And by the time we'd finished the meal, we'd raised about £4,000. And I was
mm,
like, that's amazing. I mean, it blew my mind. And what I love about crowdfunding is that it's a meritocracy. There's no barrier to entry. And the best ideas rise to the top, but there's enormous complexity with crowdfunding. And also, again, just to sort of caveat this, I'm actually an advisor to Kickstarter now. So Kickstarter sort of pay me to sort of tell them about how to improve what they're doing. So Kickstarter is amazing. It's getting better and better. But there are some really key considerations with crowdfunding that you need to think about, which is, you need to deliver the project. You need to keep backers completely updated all the time. And it can get very stressful. I've seen um, filmmakers get very emotional when they're getting criticized. And sometimes people on the internet can be a little bit irrational. And
absolutely.
when you're dealing with creatives who are quite emotional and sensitive, you need to have a thick skin to deal with all of that. But we are, like, it'll be 6 years in May that CREATORVC has been in operation, and it's absolutely been life changing. And I skip into work. I get to work on projects I adore with people that I really respect and admire, and it's been utterly life changing. And you know when you're a creator putting work out for people, you're going to get criticized. You need to be able to handle that. And I feel like with each project that we do, we looked at how can we improve it? How can we make our customer service better? How can we involve our backers more in the process? How can we troubleshoot stuff? So I think with Kickstarter, Indiegogo, those platforms as a kind of entry level um, way into making, getting the funds to make your project real, I think they're absolutely amazing, like both of them. Kickstarter for me is the best. It's got the biggest audience, but you've got an open comment section then, and so people can write anything. And especially if a project gets delayed, most projects get delayed because no one can see into their crystal ball. I think every single, apart from the In Search of Darkness series, which is very well planned out now, most of our projects had suffered a delay. That might have been down to the pandemic or things beyond our control, but that's inevitable. But the trick is to make sure you keep up, backers updated, as much as possible. And the other thing I would say to people considering it is you can't please all of the people all of the time.
Yeah.
So like what will happen is we'll release a film and we'll get like 99 amazing comments, people going nuts about it, and then you'll get one comment being critical, and that's the one you remember. But that's the kind of tax, the emotional tax you have to pay to be, a creator. But there's nothing like it, and I think that what's unrivaled with how we do things is the relationship with the audience, because there's no intermediaries, like it's direct. So part of our responsibility is to tap into that dialogue and encourage that dialogue and ultimately deliver something not for like hundreds of thousands of people, but for, for 10,000 people, where you can really hone in on what they want. And crowdfunding is an amazing way of doing that because it's a kind of one-to-one relationship. They're giving you the money because they love your idea and they want to be part of making it happen. And that doesn't happen on Netflix. That doesn't happen with
Mm.
studios. It doesn't happen with TV. It's only through this sort of direct consumer media. And it's yeah, often I help people. People write to me asking for advice, and when I can, I'm very open. But you've got to know what you're signing up for. And I've seen people, filmmakers and creatives, have really hard times, people jumping on them on social media, and that really has a significant emotional toll. So it's what I used to say with crowdfunding is it's a full contact sport. So
Hmm.
when we do a project, we're at war, not with our backers, but with inertia, right? And we've got deadlines looming, and sometimes you've got to bend reality to make sure you deliver. But coming up to 6 years in this, we're coming up to 100,000 backers. We're getting better and better. Still room to improve. I don't think we'll ever be perfect, but I feel like we're getting into a real groove with it now.
I want to transition now to a game I like to play with my guests. It's called Choose Between Two. So I tailor these questions to my guests and their likes, their what I think, their personality kind of tends towards. So are you ready to play?
Yeah, yeah, go for it. Sounds good.
All right. First one, Freddie or Jason?
Freddie.
You know,
Actually, do you want
I
to hear a
am
story about Robert England?
absolutely.
So, Robert England, when we did In Search of Darkness 1, right, we just couldn't get hold of Robert England, weren't getting any responses from any agents or anything like that. And then In Search of Darkness 1 came out and blew up and everyone loved it. And then out of the blue, we get a call from Robert England's agent saying, Robert would very much like to be in Search of Darkness Part 2. And we were
Mm.
like, yes, we'd very much. It's like the best conversation with an agent I've ever had in my life. And he was fantastic. So Freddie all day long, although Kane Hodder was, a great contributor as well. But for me, Freddie, yeah.
I go Freddie too because I think Robert England's kind of like what he does with that role, and the kind of like the personality he kind of brings to it as well, even during the more kind of like comedic kind of like elements later on in the series, was still just fantastic. And for me, just the nostalgia speaking, I remember always looking for those movies first when I go to the horror section. Something about the look of the character, and the key art as well on the VHS covers as well just really spoke to me.
So it's interesting. In the UK, in Europe, Graham Humphreys was the guy that did the artwork for the VHS and posters over here.
Mm.
And when I was setting up In Search of Darkness, I approached him and he did a poster for us. And it was because of that relationship with the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. But it's interesting. About a year and a half ago, I went to the cinema to watch a screening of the first Nightmare on Elm Street, and it just holds up. It's just such a everything about it is
Yeah.
direction, effects, performances. That's why people still keep going back to it.
Sticking with the Freddy theme, Wes Craven or John Carpenter?
For me, that's actually a hard one. I'm going to say John Carpenter, because he was like our white whale. Like he
Mm.
came in right at the end of crowdfunding for In Search of Darkness 1. He was fantastic. Um, I think that, people call him the master of horror for a reason, and he's still with us, which is amazing. Back in, if I look, you won't be able to see it, but I'm looking up at a poster that I got when I went to see John Carpenter in concert back in
Right.
2018. And it was like he was on stage with his son and his band, and in the background they were playing all the clips from his movies when he was
Yeah.
going through the soundtracks, and it was just packed with horror fans, and people were having like a religious experience. When I started working on In Search of Darkness, had no idea how powerful and committed horror fans are. Like they have an insatiable appetite. And the reason that I will go with John Carpenter is um, you know, because he's still here, because he's a touchstone. And when you think of horror, you think of John Carpenter. Wes Craven's an incredible filmmaker.
Mm.
Wish he was still around. Wish he could still create work. And in fact, we're rediscovering earlier films in his catalog, and all of it stands up. But I feel like the optics are stronger on John Carpenter.
Practical effects or CGI?
I'm so biased. Like I'm practical all day long.
Yeah.
Like if with the person I would love to interview most in the world for one of our projects is Rob Bottin,
Okay.
who did the effects on The Thing. Doesn't do any media interviews. At some point I'm going to make a very considered push to try and contact him. But yeah, like I've been revisiting a lot of films. Like we're thinking of doing a project on The Thing from
Yeah.
1982, and I'm actually going to the cinema next week to watch a screening in London. But I watched it recently, and it just, I, you know, there's no suspension of disbelief. Everything stands out. And then you look at I think the 2011, The Thing, where it's already dated. It
Mm.
already feels cartoony. And I think one of the reasons that I've really tuned out of all the superhero movies is because there's no threat. Nothing feels real. It feels like a cartoon. And I feel like there's a strong pull for genre films to actually bring back practical effects now.
And I imagine that's why something like Mad Max Fury Road kind of appealed to so many people as well. Because while there was of course moments in the film where you had to have those little touches, a lot of that kind of like practical vehicular kind of like violence that George Miller is so well known for, it kind of like resonated with a lot of people, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And it just doesn't date. Even bad practical effects, and I use that word sparingly,
Yeah.
still have a real charm to them. Whereas bad CGI, like we're doing 90s horror now,
Mm.
and the early 90s where everyone started beginning to use CGI, and it's horrifically dated. It has a charm
Yeah.
to it. Like you can look past it, but it's a very different aesthetic to sort of uh poorer um practical effects.
Um, okay, I think I might know this one as well. Streaming or physical media?
Okay, so our audience are physical media devotees, and I think that one of the things that we've realized with our merchandising of our projects is that's almost as important as like how good the documentary is.
Yeah.
So what we're working towards now is creating almost mementos, things that kind of are a manifestation of your fandom, and we spend a lot of time on like the Blu-ray booklets and the Blu-ray packaging and the artwork and all that because we want to make something tactile and real. So I'm going to say physical, but I don't dislike streaming. I use streaming. I don't have a massive. My Blu-ray collection is limited to like films that I have to own, but I'm not a
Mhm.
collector. But I have a Plex library of content that is brilliant when to have it on demand. Like if I'm on holiday, I can just watch any of my favorite movies immediately. So I think that's huge. I think the challenge now, and I think one of the reasons that we've been able to be successful is there is a kind of disconnect between the audience and what they're watching because there's nothing tangible, because cinema audiences is down, and because you can just watch stuff and consume stuff easily over the internet. That connection isn't as strong as it used to be, and that's a shame. I think the pendulum will start to swing the other way. The same way that vinyl made a comeback, I do believe physical media will make a comeback. But also, when we look at our demographics, our age group, 35 to sort of 55, right? We're the ones that buy physical media.
Yeah.
We're doing our first horror gaming project where it's skewed to a younger audience, and they're less inclined for physical media because they've grown up in that um, kind of internet limitless environment.
Last one, popcorn or candy when you're at the cinema?
I'm not a popcorn guy at all. My wife loves popcorn. I'm a candy guy all day long. And I still haven't, I'm still greedy. So I end up buying too much and like 20 minutes into the film feeling a bit unwell because I kind of
Yeah.
scoffed it all. But there's something really great. Like going to the IMAX in London. What did I go and see? I went to see the new Godzilla movie
Yeah.
at the IMAX. It was fantastic. And I kind of smashed pick and mix, for the first 20 minutes of that. It was great.
I just want to get back now to some of the things with the In Search of movies in regards to, you know, when I talk to a lot of filmmakers, independent filmmakers, producers, what have you, it's really interesting how a lot of times when they delve into different aspects of filmmaking, it's kind of like learning a new skill. There's skill sets that they have that maybe never knew beforehand. They learn on the job and they bring it towards other projects. I think something that's essential with your movies is your interviews with your different people in your film. There's a lot of talking heads, whether it be people from the media or the talent themselves in the film. What was that like at first, kind of reaching out to all the different people that you needed to talk to on, say, the first In Search of Darkness or In Search of the Last Action Hero, and reaching out to them and saying, hey, we're going to make these, we're making a documentary of this stuff. I mean, are the artists just as community driven as, say, the media or the fans are, or is there some kind of pushback from them where they're like, well, I don't want to talk about that stuff because I've done it a million times already, or is it the other way around?
It's a really mixed bag. So on the whole, if you've got a credible project and you're funded and you can pay them, they'll be there. I feel that the kind of mainstream, um, yeah, take a step back, right? So we don't contact talent directly. We have to go through agents,
Yeah,
and agents aren't used to really working with low budget independent productions. They don't understand crowdfunding at all. It's very confusing for them. And so obviously, because they're representing their clients, they need to be a bit cautious. So in the early
yeah,
days, we got a lot of knockbacks, um, but we just persevered. And that's all you can do. But the way that I position crowdfunding, or how I used to, because we're established now, so we've got a kind of back catalogue and been in all the, been in Variety, Hollywood. We're kind of known in this space, so it's easier sometimes now. But when we started out, it was just you just had to show your passion and credibility. And one of the ways that we could demonstrate credibility is that we managed to gather, a few thousand people to part with a significant amount of money based on an idea. You've got to have, that demonstrates demand, that demonstrates commitment, all of those kind of things. I remember with In Search of Darkness in particular, there was one moment for us which was kind of pivotal. And I remember this, and I've said, so I was on the phone with Barbara Crampton, and icon, hugely influential in the horror community now, still relevant now, still bringing out new movies now.
yeah,
But she's beloved for the roles that she did in the 80s. And I remember being on the phone to her. She goes, "Listen, I just don't do crowdfunded projects. I've been burnt by them." And I remember having to convince her that we were legitimate, professional. This was going to be something brilliant. And in the end, she decided to do it. She flew in to LA from San Francisco to do the interview and was phenomenal. And having Barbara on board actually gave us a kind of seal of credibility. So when you're building up these projects, starting to get a few names, people think, oh, well, that person's there. I should probably be involved. And also, we're shining a light on their legacy, work that they've done in their career, which has mattered to people.
yeah,
Um, so, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but I think the biggest thing is you've always got to remain professional. I think one of the challenges that we have is with agents. you can get really great agents and you can get really bad agents,
Mm.
and it's sort of as you go from A-list to D-list, like agents can get progressively worse. But it's just, it's one of those things that you just have to sort of it's expected now. And that's the best thing that can happen with a project is momentum, building momentum. You get into that zone where people are saying, yes, you're getting this list of amazing names together, and it just grows like a snowball, and that becomes pretty powerful. That's a great feeling.
Um, when it comes to also documentaries about horror movies, I think that what In Search of Darkness did was really open the floodgates for other people to say, you know what, this is a really interesting way to go about talking about the horror movies that I love. Maybe not even horror movies, some sci-fi as well, but there's been so many since then that I've seen that's kind of like followed your formula of how you go about doing stuff. Um, and people keep making them because people keep watching them. They can't get enough of this of this
Can't
of
get
the
enough of it.
of
Yeah.
this type of content. And a lot of it's power of nostalgia, I think. But I think it's another thing where I just love to know about the art behind the content that I'm watching, the film that I'm watching. I love knowing the behind the scenes stuff. I love hearing the stories. I love all that kind of stuff. Um, do you think that In Search of Darkness really set the path for that type of filmmaking? That we're even now we're seeing, you know, films about RoboCop that are done over like four feature length kind of like episodes and such now. I mean, are you ready to stand up and say, "Yep, this is I'm the one who really planted the flag in the ground
No,
for this"?
no, I wouldn't say that. I think Robodocs took 7 years to produce, right? So, and I think they started it in 2016.
Hmm.
So, Robodoc really happened before us. So yeah, I mean that's it would be lovely to say, but we can't take credit for that. I think what we did and what we've done is legitimize. In Search of Darkness now is a brand. It's got a book coming out. It's had a TV series. We'll never stop making In Search of Darknesses. Like we're going to cover all areas of horror. And that's been a great platform for us to kind of step out and do other things. And it's Creative VC. When I started it, I was like, I want to enable other creators. Like
Right.
I'll never criticize other creators because it's really hard to do. You mentioned RoboDoc. I haven't seen it. All I've heard is great things,
Yeah,
you
me
know,
too.
and like that doesn't happen. Like great things don't happen if you're not committed. The fact that it took them 7 years to make it shows you how hard it is to put one of these things together.
Hmm.
And what I would say is we're doing that every year,
Yeah.
more than that. So we're sort of at a slightly different stage. So, uh, I, I don't watch a lot of other people's documentaries because I like focusing on what we do and getting closer to the source. So, the behind the scenes stuff are really interesting. I think that within Search of Darkness, I remember working on that project while In Search of the Last Action Heroes was in production. And I remember writing down in my notepad like who I wanted in it and how I wanted it to be with the poster art and going from year to year and going into that wall of posters and all those things now which people are familiar with and like it. But I think a big bonus for us was working with David Weiner,
Hmm.
who masterfully directs them. And the rewatchability, the fact that every time we do a Blu-ray release, they sell out. The
Yeah.
fact that Blu-rays go for hundreds of dollars, like the merchant, other documentaries don't come anywhere close to that. And I think that says a lot about how it's produced and the level of work that's put into it. So yeah, so I mean, I think that we were one of the breakout successes, which I'm really delighted to be part of. But there will be others. I mean, I think that where personally, I'm moving towards is not just behind the scenes, because huge IP like Aliens, or everyone's seen everything, right?
Yeah.
So where I'm working towards is, how can we remind ourselves of how great this is? How can we, as a community of super fans, work together to kind of reassess how great this film is? With Aliens Expanded, there's been some amazing documentaries, superior firepower. In fact, the director of that, Charles Deslorica, is in our film, right?
Mm.
So we're sort of not trying to compete with the behind the scenes. We're trying to reassess it. We're going like almost scene by scene and deconstructing it together with our backers. And it's kind of like, how can we all nerd out together on this film? And I really enjoy that, because where my head's at the moment is like, there's certain films I just go back to and I love and I revisit. And there's only, if you go and interview an actor, there's only so many stories they can tell you. There's
Yeah.
only so much you can document. And I think that where I'm trying to go to now is actually include the voices of the fans and nerd out about various elements, and make it really indulgent. But the most important thing is it has to be entertaining. Like, it has to be something you can watch and you just get that glow, that nostalgic glow, and you're completely engaged.
Yeah.
And I think our work, when it is at its best, it reminds you of why you love what you love.
Yeah. I want to go over to a bit of a rapid fire questions. I want to throw it towards you right now. Um, Favorite British horror movie?
Oh, oh, favorite. I probably own this. Oh, I know, The Woman in Black.
Ah, very good. Cool. Very good. Wicker Man's my favorite one. Best remake of
Oh,
a horror
actually, Wicker
movie.
Man. You know what, right? So it's a toss-up. I went to the cinema again last year to watch Wicker Man. I've
Right,
got the
it's
book
73,
and
yeah.
the soundtrack, yeah. But The Woman in Black was the greatest jump scare I've ever had. And it was a
Hmm.
TV movie as well. So yeah,
Yeah. Best remake of a horror movie
The Thing.
thing. Since we got the In Search of Darkness 1994 coming out soon, what would you say is the most underrated 90s horror movie?
Underrated. Um, Gosh. Perhaps something like Wishmaster. I know
Okay,
it's a bit
yeah.
later into the 90s. But I'm actually still discovering 90s. But about a year ago, when we knew we were going to do the 90 to 94, the team was set this agenda of watching all the movies so we could channel into the aesthetic for early 90s. And I saw some great movies. But Wishmaster, I think, is a little bit later. But I just loved how that was totally 90s. Like, it just, everything, like the performances, um, so I'd say that I'm sure if I gave this more thought, I would come up with a better option. Oh, you know what? It depends what you mean by underrated. So I feel like a lot
So
of, yeah,
when I say underrated, I'm talking about, so when people say 90s horror movies, they say Scream, they say Sixth Sense stuff. I'm talking
yeah.
about those films that maybe would have come out
Or
like early
Brain Dead,
90s. Brain
or
Dead?
Dead Alive, right? So
Yeah.
Brain Dead, if you're in Europe, and Dead Alive if you're in US. Peter Jackson's like second or third feature, um, is is probably underrated. I mean, it's a phenomenal full-on gore fest, but does it with class and style and finesse, and it's funny as hell. And whenever because I used to watch that a lot as a teenager, and I still
Mm.
go back to it now, and I still really enjoy it.
Um, for me, I have two picks for that decade. Exorcist Part Three, which I think is just fantastic film, and In the Mouth of Madness. We're talking about John Carpenter before as well. And I choose them as underrated because, especially something like an Exorcist Part Three, to have like the follow ups on something that's as big as something like The Exorcist. I mean, anything that comes afterwards will be kind of pale in comparison. But I think number three, with what William Peter Blatty does as a director and writer in that film, is just fantastic in that movie. I'm a
Got
big
so many
fan of the
moments.
film.
Again, an amazing jump scare as well.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
recently, a few months ago, had that as a watch party, and I rewatched it again. I actually quite like Exorcist too. I know it's
Mm.
not 90s, but I
The
just love
Heretic.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You were talking earlier in a conversation that you went out for pizza once with your family. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Yes. Yeah, I don't do it personally, but when I was a teenager, I used to work at Pizza Hut,
Hmm.
and they used to have the Hawaiian pizza there. So yeah, I haven't had one in a long time, but yeah, I'm not. It doesn't appall me.
Opinion is very split on that. I've got 2-on-2 so far on that so far. With that one, and I gotta say, the no's are way more vocal about it than the yeses. The yes, like, oh
Yeah,
yeah, sure,
yeah,
why not? But the
yeah. I
no's
don't
like,
mind it. I don't
hell
mind it.
no, you know.
Yeah.
Last one, favorite horror poster. Or like favorite poster of a horror film.
Oh, that's such a good question. All right, so there's loads for different reasons. Picking a favorite is nigh on impossible. What comes to my mind, all right, the great thing about 80s VHS poster art and cover art, if we can include that, is
Yeah, of
that
course. Yeah.
often the poster art and the cover art was actually way better than the movie,
Hmm.
right? But it kind of sold you on the movie. So one of the ones that I really love is the Video Dead.
Okay.
If you Google that, it's the hand coming through the TV and it's really
Mm.
visceral. Anything by Graham Humphreys generally is pretty amazing. And gosh, if I was going to pick my favorite one, it would probably be The Thing.
Okay, that's a great one too. Yeah, I love that one. I got that somewhere on the side here. Uh, out of shot here. Yeah, but that's a great one too. And I especially love the title sequence of that as well in the movie. We just had the kind of
How
like
they
the
did it,
thing kind
yeah.
of yeah. Suppose it was a garbage bag or something, right? And a kind of
Yeah, yeah,
a
in
lighter or
an
something.
aquarium,
Yeah,
yeah. But this is the thing. So I'm looking at doing after Aliens expanded, I'm looking at doing The Thing expanded. And what we
yeah.
don't want to do is just retread because there's some great, they're on YouTube, some of the extras, and you're a committed fan of The Thing. I can tell that you've got the poster up, you know about some of the stories. What I want to do is reanalyze The Thing,
Mm,
expand on the lore, look at, why did scenes work? Like, what can we learn from this movie? How can we see it in a new way? So I think
yeah.
that's the value in what we're trying to do now, is we're trying to take something you know really well, intimately, and extract even more value from it.
Yeah, sounds like a great project if it gets off the ground in the future. Um, Last question I have for you to continue our conversation. I know I've used the word documentary numerous times when I came to talking about In Search of Darkness, especially the In Search of Darkness series. To me, though, they go beyond that. To me, they're almost kind of like archival libraries are kind of like this genre of movie in this decade where that genre was really kind of prominent on them. When you look back on the creation of these films, though, even though you're still creating, but essentially, especially the first one, like when you look back on that right now and just how essential that movie was in not only bringing the aid, I think that movie more than anything else really brought forth the a lot of films in the 80s people kind of forgot are like horror movies, but also the people behind them and the influence they have on communities as well. What when you think about that movie and those films, how do you kind of perceive them now? And what do you think they're going to be in like 10 years time from now? Because like I said, to me, it's almost kind of like, a museum, a digital museum of like all these great
It is, it
movies.
is. I mean, it's amazing. When I started out putting this together and putting the team together, and literally it started from an idea on a notepad.
Mm,
I couldn't have conceived of where it's taken it to. People have had tattoos based on the art. It's been amazing. I'm so grateful for that experience. Sometimes I look at it, and if I take my ego out of it, sometimes just ideas pop up, and it's the right time. It was the right time. The emotion and the nostalgia that was driving me to make In Search of Darkness wasn't isolated. It was a current, you know, and we sort of that we caught that wind of demand and took it as far as we could. You talk about a digital archive. We actually set up last year, insearchofdarkness.com, which has over 40 hours of material, has about
Mm.
25 hours of long form interviews with the people we did in search. So and we're going to build on that, right? And so if I take a step back now, in 100 years from now, when people look at the history of cinema or films or whatever they've become in 100 years, immersive realities probably, but they'll look at In Search of Darkness because it's a document, a record of
Yeah.
or a snapshot of a time. And sadly, a few of our contributors are no longer with us. And so, I think it would be nigh on impossible for someone to come along now and look at the 80s in the same way we did, because times moved on. In the future, we want to look at 1970s horror. But how we do that will have to be a little bit different, because many of the people and creators are no longer with us because it's so
Yeah.
far away in time. And so I feel like we caught the 80s at the right time, and we had like 125 contributors in total. And it's in a way, when I'm looking up at a poster that we had created of the premiere we had in Hollywood, for In Search of Darkness. And I remember sitting next to David in the audience at the Egyptian Theatre. It was a packed, like 600-seat audience, completely nervous, because no one's seen this. Am I going to get sort of lynched? But hearing people laugh and then the reaction and signing posters, it was like a bucket list moment for me.
Mm.
And so uh, I've moved on. We're now doing 90s. We're trying to get better. We want to make it more intimate for backers. It's not to be part of one of our projects. It's not it's not cheap. It's an investment, but it's something that we're trying to make very special for our backers. And we've got thousands of amazing backers now, and it's just a huge responsibility as well. But I'm now looking at how can we dive closer into what makes that intimacy between an IP that you love and you as a fan. Like, how can we make that even closer, right? So, and you can't predict what happens with projects. You can only do the best you do. Some projects succeed, some don't. Touch wood, we haven't had. All of our projects have done really well. But you can't focus on that. You have to just focus on like what inspires you, and you learn. And even today I've got a meeting with my team to talk about the feedback from a big rough cut we've sent out to backers to look at how we can improve it. And it's very scary. It's like sending your baby into the world
Mm.
specifically to get criticized, but it's something we do because we respect our backers. We're basically delivering for them, and we want to make sure that as much as possible we've listened to them. We haven't just made a film and pushed it out. And I want to get better at that. I want to make it more intimate. I'd rather have. There's an amazing. Whenever I talk to creators or people email me, I always link them to, and I'll send this to you, Matt. You should put it in the description. It's a short essay by a guy called Kevin Kelly, and it's called 1,000 True Fans.
Mhm.
Right. And basically the premise is that every creator should try and garner 1,000 true fans, because if you find 1,000 true fans, you'll have a career. Right.
Mm.
And we're very fortunate we have, multiples of that. But I always go back to the top 1,000 backers. My job is to create work that's meaningful for them, and not just give us your money, see you in a year, or in 18 months. We want you to be involved all the way through the process. So every week we have live events depending on what projects we're running. I think we've got 3 or 4 projects running right now. So it's a very immersive, interactive experience if you want to be part of that. Some backers just go like, I've pre-ordered, yeah, I'll wait to get the shipping notification. you know,
Right.
so it's different. But my target audience are people that are just like are gonna obsess about it, and then it becomes really fun, and it becomes hard because the pressure's high because you want to deliver, but that pressure is what makes great things happen. And I love it. And the adrenaline rush after we finish a campaign and we delivered a film is like I always get ill at the end because I've just been on adrenaline, but it's amazing. And even though you even though I get a lot of hard days with this, like my job is solving problems all day long. You know, it's a
Mm.
very human driven process. Um, but I still so grateful I get to do this. I love it. I really believe it's my vocation.
And I'm incredibly grateful for your time today, Robin Block. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today as someone who's been a fan of the In Search of documentaries. And I tell you what, I can't wait to watch In Search of Darkness 1990, 1994. Like I said to everyone out there, 90shorrordoc.com. You can now put your pre-orders in. You can do all, just check out the
We've taken
website.
it
There's
off
so many things
pre-order
there.
actually, but you
Oh,
can
yeah?
sign up. You can sign up because we'll do another one next
Okay.
October. But
Excellent.
we've got all our events starting to happen now, all our live events for our backers, and yeah, like the 90s, we call it the lost decade. But I feel like the fan base really want to shine a light on it because they know about it. They just want to go. They just want to reminisce. The 90s is hot right now.
Yeah.
But I know if we wanted to in the future, we could go back and revisit 80s again, like because there was like 640 80s horror movies, and we've probably only scratched the surface. We've probably only done about a quarter of that in the In Search of Darkness series. So there's
And
still a
I
wealth.
guarantee you, you've received so many people emails saying, "Hey, why didn't you cover this or that?" Right? I imagine that.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, I mean, like, when that started to happen, like at the beginning it became annoying, right? Because we're like, oh, we're getting criticized because we didn't include this movie or that movie.
Yeah.
Now we realize that it's an opportunity to continue. When we were doing In Search of Darkness, we weren't thinking about doing part two or part three or going for the 90s. And the goal and the dream would be to never stop, you know, until we've covered every film. In the 90s, it's brilliant because you've got obviously some, and that's why we split the decade into two parts.
Hmm.
So instead of trying to cram all the main stuff into one film, one decade, we've gone 90 to 94, and then hopefully after this is released, the end of this year, next year we can begin work on 95 to 99.
Hmm.
So we're splitting that one decade over two. But if there's demand, we might do a third, because we're not, inevitably we're not going to be able to fit everything in. And I think that's a good problem to have. I mean, we just released our first gaming documentary, first person
First
shooter.
person shooter. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, which was a phenomenal project. Loved it. But we got the same thing. You missed this game out, you missed that game out, and all that shows me is that actually there's room to do more.
Well, I love it. Give me more. Now just put it in my veins and just yeah, I love it. I can't say enough about how much I love these
I'll
documentaries.
send you, Matt, after this call, I'll send you a promo code so you can go in and have a look at insearchofdarkness.com.
Mhm.
So it's got all the long form interviews. It's got 20 hours of never seen before material from the In Search of Darkness 80s series. So it's kind of all up there for the hardcore horror fans to sort of indulge on.
That'll be excellent. Thank you so very much. And again, thank you so very much for your time today as well. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, brilliant to be on, and keep flying the flag for film nostalgia.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content. Also, if you would like to request a review and support my work, please join my Patreon via the link in the description below.